or welcome back to our podcast, Culture Shock Therapy, where we get into a whole lot of therapy for all of the culture shocks we experienced as third culture kids. We are your hosts. I am Shauna. This is my sister Tessa, and we are so excited to have you back on the podcast with us. So stay tuned if you would like to dive in with us.
This time we're going to be talking about international schools, whether they are a bubble or a bridge to your community and the country that you're living in. First, though, I want to check in. How are you doing?
I am doing fine. I have intense brain farts at the moment.
So it's going to be a good episode.
It's going to be a good one, I think. For those watching the blooper reel later on, they will understand what I mean. But I'm good. Busy, but like good busy. Work is going well. Loads of plans, and we're about to get ready to launch and go live, and that is so exciting. So we have so much to do. But yeah, how are you?
Funny thing is, by the time people watch this, we've already launched.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm doing good. I had a long work day today, but it went really well. I slept 2 nights in a row, like early, and I slept through the night. And that was just magical.
What a win.
Yeah, honestly.
We love sleep.
Yeah. And I started working out again, so I'm a little sore everywhere, but baby steps. Getting there.
Nice. We cheers to that.
Cheers.
Welcome.
Let's dive right in. Today we're going to be talking about international schools, like I mentioned, and how they can be a bridge or a bubble to your community or away from your community. To give a little bit of background, we spent 95% of our time at international schools. I think there was one instance where I went to a local school that was back in Penang for a short little while.
A long time ago, yeah.
But I was 3, so I don't really recall that. I don't know if you ever went to local school. I mean, in Singapore, you went to local school for a little bit when you were homeschooled.
Yeah, that was a homeschool, but it was like locally based.
It was based on the local system, kind of.
Yeah. I don't really. I mean, in Florida, we went to like a local school,
public school,
like public school. Yeah,
but
it wasn't an international school.
Yeah.
And when we lived in Holland that one year, it was also like a
local Dutch school. Yeah. Funny.
Other
in my head, that doesn't it's not considered local because we're Dutch. Then it's not. Interesting. Okay. So we spent most of our time, actually all of our time, in international schools, and a lot of different ones. I think it tallies up to like 5 or 6, maybe.
International schools?
Yeah.
I would think so, yeah.
So there's plenty of experiences. We spent some time in international schools that had the English IB system. We spent most of our time in American schools with the AP system. So I am wondering, what was your experience like going to international schools?
Well, so big voice crack. I think, like I mentioned in like I believe earlier episode, I'm not entirely sure. I thought it was like the normal thing to do. But how I experienced it was it was always so culturally rich. Because like in your class you would have like 15 different nationalities, and International Day was always like super fun, and we would have like these dance offs and performances, and it was awesome.
So much food,
so much good food. It was amazing. And I think also what I genuinely enjoyed about international schools is that everybody kind of had this mutual understanding with each other that everybody's like an expat or just like living here for a little while and I'm going to move away, or nobody's there for like a permanent base.
All nomads.
Yeah, we're all like nomads. So everybody has that understanding for each other, so I guess that makes it easier to relate.
Yeah.
And as well, like when you're like a child, you don't think about it that deeply, but I think looking back, that was really great to be able to enjoy each other's cultures and backgrounds, because it was always so celebrated in international schools.
Yeah.
And at the same time, just having so many people always in your class that you were just able to relate to based on your lifestyle.
Yeah.
How do you look back?
I think a little bit the same. I enjoyed going to international school a lot because, like you said, there are so many different kinds of cultures. And I think by going to international schools, you also learn to not make a difference between different ethnicities and nationalities.
For sure.
People just are people, and they're your friends or they're not your friends, but
they're classmates.
Yeah. And so there's, like you said, this mutual understanding. And I enjoyed learning about other people's cultures and just feeling at home in so many different cultures, because I feel like if we went to local school, there's definitely, pros about local school.
Yeah, for sure.
But then it would have just been, us as a expat in a school with a bunch of people mostly of one culture, and then you miss the connection of, hey, but I'm growing up like this and you're all growing up like that. I think it would have been harder to settle for us. And at the same time, I think if we had gone to local school, then we might have settled even deeper in the country that we were.
Maybe, yeah.
Because you get even more immersed into the culture and experience.
Yeah.
So it has pros and cons, but I look very fondly back on international school. I would love to send my kids to international school, and I miss it sometimes because it just has like this whole excitement to it or something.
Yeah, and just like this homey, comfortable feeling that even though like there were some flaws,
Of
and
course, every school has its
we're
flaws.
gonna
Yeah,
like get into some of the funny things, cultural misunderstandings and just funny situations later on in the episode. But in general, I look back and I just get like this cozy, like familiar family feeling, especially with our last school.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I look back so fondly on that, but I feel like also if we went to local school, in this case, maybe in Singapore, because we lived there the longest, and how much we immersed with the culture there, I feel like for me, I don't know what it's like for you, but if I went to local school in Singapore for 10 years, I feel like it would have like,
ramifications.
no, projected me into an identity crisis.
Going into the local school or later coming out of it.
Like later, like coming out of it, like if
Yeah,
we like leave there after graduating and stuff and then come to Holland for, our college education. Um, I don't know how it would have went, but I speculate it could have gone this way because then you're like not just immersed in like Singapore life, in this example, but like you become it,
yeah.
you know?
But the funny thing is, I think it might have very much influenced our choices where we go to college. Because I
You think
considered
so?
Singapore for a little while for university,
Yeah,
but I kind of knew like Singapore had the culture of everybody wants to be the best,
for
which
sure.
by the way worked so well for me because that I need like the surrounding pressure. What do you call that? Like the
The competitive nature
yeah, I
and
need that to
fear of failure and
shame. No, I'm just kidding.
shame-based
Um,
culture and if you don't get an A plus plus, it's like, "Meh."
but I feel like that worked really well for me
Yeah.
on the one hand because it pushed me to try harder. Um, But knowing that I had not done my best in high school, I didn't feel like I even stood a chance to get into university in Singapore. So that was off the table for me pretty quickly.
Mhm.
But if I had gone to local school, that would have been so much more just like the obvious choice.
Yeah.
So I might have stayed in Singapore then.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But I mean, we
understand.
didn't. So that changed. That doesn't really change anything to what happened. Um, but to recap, I look really fondly on the international school time. And I'm wondering, what's the funniest thing you experienced when you were in international school?
That is a great question. I I'm not entirely sure if there's like this one instance that like really stands out to me, like, oh, that was hilarious or that was absurd or bizarre. I do remember the school we went to in Singapore. I think that just sticks with me the most because we were there for so long
Yeah,
comparatively. Um, I remember cheering on one of your basketball games. And we would like, I would sit on the stage, and like all a bunch of other students would also be sitting on the stage and cheering y'all on. And I think we were in 10th or 11th grade or something like that. And some middle schoolers came and sat next to me. And they're like, she's your sister, right? I was like, yeah. She's doing this and that with basketball. Oh yeah, that's cool. So like, where are you guys from? They asked. Like they were like 12 or 13, and I was like, oh, we're from Holland. And this 12-year-old boy like looks me like dead in the face. He's like, oh, you're from Holland? Do you smoke weed? And I was like, bruh.
we live in Singapore.
Well, that
Sorry, that should not be the first reason not to smoke weed. For those of you who don't know, Singapore has very strict laws regarding drugs to the point of death penalty or very serious jail time. So if you ever consider visiting Singapore, do not
be
even
mindful.
consider
Yeah,
taking, smuggling, anything.
know what you're getting into is
Yeah,
a good thing, and just don't do that. Don't
exactly.
don't get into locked up
Not just for
abroad.
the jail time,
Yeah.
but because drugs are not good for you.
But yeah, that was kind of like the genuine thing. And another thing is like there were people there that I think just because they maybe weren't familiar with our culture. I mean, we didn't really know our culture, to be honest, but like with like maybe the Western European Dutch culture, that they would ask questions sometimes that I would be like genuinely stumped. Like, how do I respond to this? Because mom and dad were quite, you could say, liberal with, um, for example, like how you would handle alcohol.
Yeah.
Like we were permitted once we reached age 16 to have a drink with our parents in the room with their permission on a weekend evening, you know. So it wasn't even like crazy, it was just very regulated.
Sometimes just like a Rattler that has 2%
Yeah,
alcohol
but to
or
kind of like start testing it out a little bit in a safe
the
environment,
exposure
know your
therapy,
limit.
so it's not,
Exactly.
yeah.
And for some reason, that word spread around school like wildfire. I find it hilarious looking back. And then we were gonna go on a trip with our senior class. And alcohol and cigarettes and everything was strictly forbidden, which I
And
understand because it's a school trip.
by this time you were 20 already.
I was 20,
So
yeah,
in Singapore, the legal age is 18 for smoking and drinking. And by this time you were a smoker.
for a
And
long time already.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, but like you were legally a smoker.
Yeah.
At school, we were not allowed to smoke.
Mhm.
And you would every now and then enjoy an alcoholic beverage, but you never really got into it.
I
So it
never
wasn't
really
even
drank that much
a
anyway.
thing.
Don't really like it that much. But anywho, so word had gotten around that one, I smoked, and two, that we sometimes drink an alcoholic beverage. And one of the team leaders for our trip called me aside and with genuine concern was like, I've heard that you consume alcohol and that is forbidden on this trip. But do we need to make special arrangements in case you really need to do
In
anything?
case you get withdrawals.
I was like, bro, what?
I mean, it's very
I
honestly, it's very out of the box and sweet that they would consider asking that.
That's the thing. That's literally like I can't even like get mad or frustrated or irritated, anything like that. Because on the one hand, it's so wholesome.
Yeah,
I love it. I love like the fact that they're taking this thing that's quite um
taboo.
well, not only taboo, but what's the word I'm looking for? Mm, it's like a distant thing for them. You know, it's not something that
Oh yeah, yeah. It's not directly beside their bed show. Is that Dutch?
I don't know.
Far from your bed show, like
I think that's a Dutch
oh,
expression.
whoops. Um,
No, but
it's not something that they come in contact with every day to have these situations
yeah,
because it's
so it's
not their
not even
culture.
exactly. So it's something kind of like that they don't really mind with. So on the I loved the fact that he took the time to like
Check in with you.
check in with me, and on the other hand, I was like, I don't know what rumor has gone around, like considering the truth of the situation, to think that I would need some special permission to not consume alcohol for a week and if I would be okay with that.
And smoke.
And smoke. Smoking was different, but I understood. I
Yeah.
wasn't as much of a chain smoker as I am these days, but um I could live with that. That was okay. But I was just like dumbfounded. Like, what
What are
do you
you
mean?
asking
Am I
me?
an alcoholic?
The identity question: am I an alcoholic?
Yeah, but I don't look back on that with any negative view or anything. It
Yeah.
was just something that
So sweet and
it
funny.
was from a really sweet and genuine place, but it just completely stumped me.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
The first thing that comes to mind is when we had anatomy class, you and I together.
Mm,
And eventually in anatomy and physiology, you're going to talk about sex and about reproduction and all of that. And it's not a biology lesson, but it's part of anatomy.
yeah.
And eventually our teacher, who was quite open about like talking about sex in a good way, like to
Healthy.
yeah,
Yeah.
healthy, to show that it's not a taboo, it's not a
It's
thing
a
that
bodily thing.
yeah, you should be able to talk about it. And he looked around the class and he asked us, raise your hands if you openly talk to your parents about sex. And it was dead quiet. Everybody's hands were down, and Shauna and my hands just shot up into the air because our parents are very open about the
Reproductive system?
yeah, I was the crap. My brain is like frying in Dutch and English. The topic of sex.
Yeah.
When I was in 5th grade, um, we had the sex talk at school.
Yeah.
And I had already long had the sex talk from my parents at home. obviously cringing because as a child you hate these moments.
Yeah.
And after school, I got home and we're sitting at the dinner table, and my dad looks at me and he asks me, "How was the reproduction talk at school?" And I kind of shy away, like, "Hey, I don't want to talk about it." And he looks me dead in the eye and he starts banging on the table and just chanting, "Sex, sex, sex," with the
Oh,
idea.
we could like just like melt away in our chairs
Exactly.
because as an 11 and 9-year-old, that's like the worst thing
You
that could
don't want to
happen.
hear about that. But he
Yeah.
said, "I'm going to do this until you don't cringe because it's a normal word. And it's good that you feel comfortable to talk about it because that's going to prevent you from getting into bad situations."
Yeah.
So I definitely understand where he was coming from. But in that moment, I felt so much shame. Like, this is so weird. Why is my dad doing
But
this?
I think like even though that might have been a little bit how do you say
Intense.
alternative, an alternative approach, now we're also just like very open about it. And in anatomy class where I feel like in our memory everybody just kind of like shied away and it was like awkward
Oh
and
my
like,
God,
oh, don't want to
sex.
talk about this, we're just like, oh, bring it on.
But the funny thing is, yes, we're open about it, but at the same time, compared to my friends here, I am not. Because if I
Yeah.
make a joke about sex or we're just talking about it, my friends will always say that I'll be like, "Oh, did you know that sex is a thing?" Like, I'll lower my voice when I talk about it. And I kind of care because what if people hear me and it sounds weird and they're like, "Dude, nobody cares, just talk normally."
Yeah.
And they say that I'm shy when it, like,
But then imagine like the context importance to things like this, like the
yeah,
sex, the alcohol, the smoking, in all of these taboo subjects, really. But like for our setting, we were very open, liberal, we're not in like a shame mentality.
yeah,
And then compared to here in Holland, it was just like nothing is off limits. So even for us, it was sometimes like, ooh.
we go in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that contrast funny.
Yeah.
How there we were very open and the only ones to raise our hands that we talk about it openly, and yet here with my friends, they still laugh at me because I'm considered what's the word where you're like,
Prudish.
yeah, prude. That's what they call me. Um, so that made me laugh. But that's, I think, the funniest thing like I can think of right now.
I
Um,
genuinely do think, like, those teachers, what must they have thought of us?
I don't know because I remember that like on the one hand, you like to give a little edge, and kind of test the waters, how they're going to respond.
Me or just
No,
students
no,
in
no, just
general?
you and me.
Oh.
And on the other hand, it was a very obedience based um, culture, and you fit inside the lines because otherwise, well, you just don't stray outside of the lines. And one time, we were hanging out after we went to Oktoberfest when I was like 16 and you were
That
18,
was a good day.
and Dad let us have at least my first beer.
We
Um,
danced on the table with jugs of beer, just, like, going.
and it was so fun, and it
Yeah.
was just one beer. It's not like we were drinking
It was
completely
a
out of
very large
limits.
jug of beer.
And afterwards, we went to Starbucks on Orchard, and we ran into some teachers. And they're like, "Oh, what'd you do today?" I'm like, "Oh, we went to Oktoberfest." And I immediately felt the need to be like, "Oh, but it was the family version. Don't worry, we weren't like drinking a bunch." And I said that to Dad, and he's like, "Why? Why are you so scared of what they think? Just tell them you went to Oktoberfest. Who cares?" And it was still really trying to find this like um, balance because reputation is important, and you don't know how other people perceive the things you say and do,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Also with the culture difference, I feel like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we were the only Dutch people in that school for a long time, and at least in high school, because
Mm.
eventually we had another kid, but he was in middle school. And I feel like we could be intense for them, even though we felt like we were very submissive,
I can imagine that. Yeah.
but also because we don't beat around the bush. And we did have our fair share of conflict
Clashes.
and
Yeah.
clashes. So I already felt like we were out there.
I feel like we didn't just mindlessly accept everything.
No.
And that I think because looking back on the whole time, it was genuinely a very positive time to look back on. So I don't want to like put off
Yeah,
on
of
that.
course.
But I think one of the, in my experience, maybe like flaws or like more negative aspects is the fact that if you spoke your mind or you didn't mindlessly accept something or you asked certain questions,
If you push the limits.
if you push the limits or didn't blindly obey, that could lead to some conflict that would linger on and it would follow you around. Um, and I think that's unfortunate in the case of I mean, it should be good that you teach kids to critically think
Yeah.
and not just critically think how you want them to critically think. And to not learn to blindly obey and accept everything that's being told by them to them, sorry, by an authority figure. Um, I feel like not even about being like rude or disrespectful, but more like um, it builds a confidence in kids if they can learn to think for themselves and if they're encouraged to challenge authority
In
when
a
the time is right in a
yeah.
respectful way and not what I'm saying like in a disrespectful way or just being combative, things like
Yeah.
that, but to have genuine like
Learning how to, give, some, pushback.
yeah, when it's necessary,
Yeah.
and not because just because you're a student that whatever you clap back, like between what are these called? Quotation marks. um,
Fingers.
that it's automatically a sign of disrespect.
Yeah, but I think that's just the school system in general. It wasn't necessarily only the
Mm,
school we went to.
for sure.
Um, you know how Rockefeller said, "I want to make a nation of workers and not thinkers," because that's how you earn money. Um, it that whole concept, what most school curriculums are based on, doesn't teach you to think. It teaches you to memorize and to work and to do what you're told. And I think going to university, especially here in the Netherlands, where you're very much thrown into the deep end, like you get a
Absolutely.
class and it's just a lecture and you got questions, figure it out. Google it, go to your classmates. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to go after you if you missed an assignment or if you don't show up to class. It's your education, you pay for it, deal with it. And I do enjoy that. It was really hard at first,
The adjustment was really hard.
but I think just everything surrounding it made it hard, you know? Obviously, it's hard when the expectations of you change and you haven't quite learned to deal with that. But I think what made it hard is that the language barrier and new culture, new country.
Well, and we went from 0 to 100 actually, because in our Singapore education system, and again, I look back on this with like such great fondness, it was very much they held your hand every step of the way.
It
They
wasn't
always
Singapore education system. It was the school we went to in Singapore. Just
yeah, 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 I'm sorry, correction. There was always a teacher that had like attention for you or you were seen or you were
so
basically
different.
kind of carried towards graduation. And then when we came here, it was just like you need to figure out everything by yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like that those two different styles are a reason that maybe the first year in adjusting here were really quite difficult because we were used to people guiding you through like
Yeah.
everything and then suddenly having to figure out everything yourself in a different country, in a different system, a different curriculum, you name it. Um, and it was also really hard to adjust to not being in an international setting.
Yeah. I totally feel that because I think the most diversity that I had in my class was whether someone came from like the north of the country or the south, which I mean they have their own cultures, but really isn't that different in my opinion. Um,
Don't say that too loudly.
but as opposed to having people in your country that are from the U.S. or from Spain or from Korea or China or whatever it may have been, I remember just my friends coming from all over, and it's the most normal thing.
Yeah.
And the funny, like, this is going to sound a bit strange, but I miss having people that are not Caucasian around me, if that makes sense. Because in Singapore, in Dubai, everywhere we lived, we were never surrounded by many Caucasians. And now in the Netherlands, I think all my friends are Caucasian. Um, and
The cultural diversity.
yeah,
Yeah.
I miss that. Like, I just get happy when I see people from other countries, even though I don't know them. They don't know me. They're probably thinking, like, why is this weirdo smiling and looking at me? But it just makes me happy because it gives me a little glimpse of home or something.
Yeah. Yeah, the cultural diversity is just something that we were so used to. Yeah. I get that. I miss that too. But I mean, we've spoken now about like a little bit of the like the funny things and the weird things and I feel like if I speak for both of us, we can agree that um like all round the international school experience was
Really great.
great. It was fun, it was homey, it was cozy, it was um very huggy.
I think it's rich, like, in the sense
Mm,
that, it makes you rich in experiences, not
yeah.
rich like money. Um,
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that we got to go to international schools, that, dad's job could afford international schools, and I would definitely, if I could do it again, I would do it for my kids.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm really thankful for the international school we went to because it was a good one.
Yeah.
It was small, it was a tight-knit community, and we still have contacts from, back then. So I would really, yeah, encourage other people, I think, as well, to go to international schools when possible.
Yeah. I think I would consider that as well if I would have children one day to go to international schools.
Yeah.
So I feel like, the theme being international schools,
Bridge or a bubble.
yeah, bridge or bubbles. I like to kind of summarize in my perspective. I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think there's a nuance in both. Because on the one hand, there's absolutely a bridge in the friends you make, the cultures you get to experience, all of the just literally different kinds of things you get to experience and do and try and the opportunities it brings, like the week without walls trips where we
Yeah.
go to other countries and serve and build homes and things like that. That is not something that we would have gotten to experience if we spent our lives in Dutch school.
Yeah.
So that is like on the one hand awesome. It's a bridge. On the other hand, I feel like it is for sure 100% a bubble. Because you do, I feel like, grow up in a very surrounded, protected, specific ideological setting. And everything you do, because like school was intertwined with
Sports
sports
and
and church and weekend activities, and you can name it.
that was also
Oh,
partially because of us, like, that we kept it
yeah.
intertwined.
Um, so you grow up like in this bubble, and then which there's nothing wrong with that. But then once you kind of step out into the real world, for us, that was moving to Holland for college.
It's a huge smack in the face.
Damn, that bubble burst.
Yeah.
That burst because I didn't know what hit me.
And I think part of it is, the international school and just the international expat life. You
Mm,
know, you do tend to connect with people going through the same thing as you. So that was often other expats. And I think the other hand, we also did it ourselves. The church that we went to had a lot of people from our school. The friends that we hang out with were primarily from school. We had trouble finding friends in our neighborhood. And
yeah.
then you also had the difference of
With
kids that
trouble, we
were,
didn't make any friends in our neighborhood.
well, no, I remember like one time we played with a few kids, but that was really short. Um, but then you had the really big difference of local school and international school, that the schedules were different. Local school, I feel like they had so much more work than we did,
It was
causing
intense.
them to always be working on school. Our vacations were different, our times were different. They had a lot of different other extracurriculars than we did.
Mm-hmm.
So the chance to connect with kids in local school was also a bit more difficult. Um, so just like everything together made that we lived quite in a bubble, I think.
Yeah.
But I agree that it's both, and it really depends on the person, whether which one connects with you and what your goal is. Because I think if we had gone to local school in all the countries that we only lived very shortly, it would have been even harder to settle every time and to leave again.
Yeah.
Whereas having gone to international school, you come in knowing that you're there temporarily, and
Yeah.
everybody knows that too,
Yeah.
because that's the culture.
Yeah.
And that made all of the switches a lot easier.
Mm, mhm, and I feel like everybody was, in general, more accepting towards being new.
Yeah.
That is a big difference that I
Ooh.
noticed. Local schools compared to international schools. If you started like beginning of the school year and you just moved, or you came in middle of the school year, in general, not everywhere, but in general, you were much more accepted into the class
Yeah.
compared to when I went to a Dutch local public school.
Yeah.
It was the difference is insane. Even when I went to Dutch college for the first year, it's more like, oh, it's the new kid stereotype.
Yeah.
Um, Bully target, all of that. But in our Singapore school and in our Dubai school, it was much more like,
It's
oh, you're
common.
here too. Let's be friends.
Yeah, and I feel like it's expected because it's so normal for expat jobs to get uprooted halfway through the year. So you have to switch schools, you switch countries. It's just kind of it's part of the culture. Whereas the local schools we went to in the Netherlands, for example, are not like that. Like
Mm.
every now and then you'll have to move because your dad's job goes from one city to another and it's so far that you don't commute anymore. But it's not that common.
Mhm.
I went to local school 1 year here when I was, I don't know, like 5 or 6, and all those kids did their entire elementary together and they're still friends. Whereas I was just someone who was there for a year and then left again,
Yeah.
which was already like odd. And I didn't even come in halfway through the year; it was at the start of the year.
Yeah.
So it's just that cultural difference of what's normal and what's not, which
Yeah.
I think made the transition every time easier
Yeah.
and more enjoyable because you don't have to be that afraid of being the new kid because everyone's been
Everyone's the new kid.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's a really good point to wrap
Wrap it
up.
up. Yeah,
Yeah?
sure.
S
So the next episode is going to be episode 5, where we talk about goodbyes, how we deal with them. Stay tuned for that. It'll be dropping in 1 week exactly. And if you're listening to this episode, we are very thankful that you've listened to another episode after our launch. We're grateful for all of the interactions that you give us, for the likes, for the comments, for the shares, the whole ram bam. Uh,
It means a lot to us.
it
Thank
really
you.
does. And we very happily read the comments that you guys place and share it with each other.
Yeah.
We'll
We're like, "Oh, this
screenshot it.
person commented."
Yeah. So we enjoyed that very much. Thank you for that. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
On episode 5.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being here.
See you next week. Bye
Bye.
bye.